Hello, everyone. My name is Brother Charles Smoot, or Chuck Smoot, more affectionately known. I have the pleasure of serving as the Illinois historian for the District of Illinois for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And I want to welcome you today to our Black History discussion series. What this series is going to be is a series of fireside chat conversations starting out with individuals who have made an impact on our collective communities and who also happen to be members of Alpha Phi Alpha. So we're going to be doing this every Thursday through Black History Month. And we are also looking to do other interviews with other individuals beyond Black History Month as well. So please keep an eye out and keep your eyes peeled. So for this month, we have five very impressive individuals that we are going to be highlighting. The individuals that we will be talking to for the rest of the month, we are happy to have Brother Greg Kelly, who is the president of the SEIU Healthcare Union. He is one of the first Black presidents of such a union in the state of Illinois. We will also be talking to Brother Shaka Rawls, who is the principal of Leo Catholic High School, and he's been doing amazing work there in motivating and working with young people in his school and in his community. Then we will have Brother Boyede Sobotan, who is the president and who is the CEO and founder of Oja Express, which is a West African food delivery service, one of the first of its kind, and he's starting to expand into other markets. We're going to be talking to him about his experience. And to round out the month, we're going to have Brother Dr. Ernest Jackson, who is the chief dentist for the Missouri Correctional Department. But more significantly, I should say, Brother Jackson is the only Black forensic dentist in the world. And Brother Jackson is one of us. So we are very excited to talk to all of these brothers through the course of the month. So I hope you all will tune in each week as we kick off this discussion series. But today we are honored to have the Reverend Brother Dr. Leonard C. McKinnis II. He's got a lot of titles, but he is a professor of African American history at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and he also currently serves as the Illinois District Director for Alpha Phi Alpha. And we're going to be talking to Brother McKinnis about his path and his journey to get where he is now. So without further ado, our Brother McKinnis, if we can bring you on.
Hello, Brother Smoot. How you doing?
Brother McKinnis, my good brother and my friend, how are you today?
I'm well. Glad to do this and be in conversation with you. I feel so honored to kick off this Black History Month series with you, talking about my work and the significance of all this to Black history, and very glad that you're doing this and that we can lead this in the district.
Well, and I appreciate you being here. And for full disclosure, for those who are watching, when I was putting together the list of panelists that I wanted to discuss this month with, I came up with the idea of using Brother McKinnis. And when I mentioned it to him, there was some pushback. He was unusually humble for a man of his sort. But I really think, I said to you directly, but my thinking was I look at what you have accomplished outside of the realm of the fraternity, and I would really think these are the types of things and things that you have done are things that we need to highlight, because it's important that people get to understand the type of work that you are doing in and around our communities.
Thank you.
So with that said, let's get into it. Brother McKinnis, tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where your early education. Just give me a little snapshot of that.
Yeah, I am from the South Side of Chicago. I, I feel like I grew up in two communities. Um, my primary community was Marquette Park in Chicago,
Okay.
and that's significant for me because my family integrated our neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
This would have been the mid '80s or late '80s rather, and we were the second Black family to live in the 70th block of Tallman. At the time,
Wow.
it was a pretty predominant Lithuanian and white community.
Right.
And my sister and I integrated St. Adrian Catholic School.
Hmm.
We were the first Black students to attend that school. It sounds shocking because here I am, just early 40s, and um, to hear me say that my family integrated a community in school is a bit baffling to me, but it's the case. But I should say prior to that, where I sort of had my real foundation in education was Saint Sabina under Father
Oh, okay.
Michael Flager.
Okay.
And in many ways, I sort of think back on that experience, and I guess part of Saint Sabina helped to radicalize me, right?
Now,
Um,
now let me ask you: were you Catholic at the time, or were you
I
part
was
of
not.
another? Okay.
My parents were interested in a different education opportunity for my
Gotcha.
sister and
Gotcha.
me.
Okay.
And so we did Catholic school early in life, with Saint Sabina and then Saint Adrian's. And so yeah, so I sort of was really grew up in that Marquette Park neighborhood and watched it, change and evolve over the years. But I also say, the second upbringing for me was in Inglewood, and I say that with real pride. My grandmother, who I loved very deeply, who is no longer with us, grew up in the 6700 block in Bishop. In fact, we it was 6752 South Bishop. And
Now, my grandfather grew up on the 6400 block of May. My grandfather
oh
lived on the
wow,
6400 block of May.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we
there
we
might be
may
some,
we may have seen each other back
yeah,
then,
yeah,
around that.
yeah. So it was between Inglewood and Marquette Park where I was really molded.
Okay.
And one more sort of piece of information here. I was a rather mischievous child.
No,
I wasn't.
that's so shocking.
I wasn't a bad child, but my mother she'll tell you. But something happened at St. Adrian that left a real mark on me. I remember being in school and not being challenged academically enough. And I got bored very quickly from the work
Right.
and started to, talk and over talk and found ways to entertain myself. And this is an important part of my development because I was in the second grade when St. Adrian school called my mother on my birthday and told my mother I could not return to St. Adrian's.
Oh, wow.
It was an incredible experience that I will never forget that episode because I didn't know what was happening. But I'll say this, Moot, is the last thing before I turn it back over to you. In terms of the context, it was Marquette Park. Remember where King,
Hmm.
visited and he was
Right.
stoned. Now
Right.
I had a similar experience. My godbrother Don Galder and I were riding our bikes through Marquette Park. I must have been in the third grade, and Don was a few years older than me. And we pulled alongside somewhere deep in the park, a pathway, and got off of our bikes. And a white van in Marquette Park, this is the mid 80s, okay, pulled up alongside of us on the pathway, rolled the window down, and two white men in a van, screamed out the window, "You two niggers, go back to your neighborhood." And
Mhm.
talk about life altering experiences.
Right.
Here I
Right.
was in the mid 80s, and I had to sort of relive, right, a very historical
Hmm.
experience that I'm sure my grandparents never imagined I would have endured. So that's the context
Right.
that I grew up in.
So and so then where'd you go to high school, and how did you
I am
decide where you want to go to college?
Well, there's one high school. I'm a proud Eagle. Lindblom.
You said there's one high school,
I,
but I know you didn't go to Whitney Young.
I
So,
don't know. I I am a proud Lindblom Eagle. Swoop. All right, class
you
of
know,
'99, Robert Lindblom High School.
God, you
And
went to Limblom.
um,
I did
uh,
not realize you went to Limblom.
oh, can't you tell? You know how Jody is smart. I'm smart. That's kind of what we do,
You know,
Lindblom people.
I wouldn't invoke that if I were you.
So
so
so yeah, Lindblom.
so when you were at, all jokes aside, because
Yeah.
Lindblom is actually an outstanding school. It's not Whitney Young, so we do have that. But I do know that Lindblom has had a long tradition of academic excellence. So
Yes.
one of the things I'm curious about is, did you find was your desire to become an educator?
Not
Was
at all.
it what was it founded when you were at Lindblom, or did that come later?
No. In fact, in high school, I still have my AOL screen name that I use for a lot of my logins and whatnot. At the time, it was Leon Law 99. I wanted to go to law
Ah,
school, right?
okay,
And the last year of high school, I applied to many colleges and got into some, but I had a life-changing experience. And I want to sort of give credit to this woman. Her name is Karen Calloway. You may know her.
yes, I
She
know
is
her
the
very,
sister of
yeah,
Keith
very,
Calloway,
very familiar with her.
his Lambda brother. And
Yes.
I was in my high school hallway at Lindblom, and Karen Calloway um, walked up to me and said, "Hey, what are you doing today?" I said, "I'm about to go to class." And Karen said, "Well, you know what? I'm taking a few kids out to a school to visit. You should go to your counselor, Mrs. Power, and get an excuse because you should go to this visit with me." I said, "Well, this is strange. I mean, I hadn't planned. I didn't even have a permission slip." So I
Hmm.
called, my aunt who I was with at the time, and got, her permission to go out to Romeoville, Illinois, to visit Lewis University.
Okay.
Had never heard of Lewis, in fact.
Hmm.
Um, got to the campus. It's a Catholic, a Christian Brothers institution,
Right.
and immediately I felt at home at this small liberal arts Catholic college,
Okay.
and I applied on the spot. And Karen somehow managed to get all of our application fees waived. And not soon thereafter, I got a notice of admission with a pretty significant scholarship.
Nice.
And so I went to Lewis and studied politics.
Okay.
And it was always my intent to go to law school, but 9/11 happened.
Right.
And I remember watching the news the next day with President George W. Bush in New York, standing in the rubble of the Twin Towers. And he got on his microphone and he said, "Now is the time for every American to come to the service of his and her nation." And I should say at the time, and we can talk about this, I was a Republican. I mean,
Okay.
I was head of college Republicans. I was really, deeply invested in that party. And so when President Bush said, "This is the call to service," I said, "How can I serve this country?" I mean, I was a college student. I didn't have much to give, right?
Hmm.
And so I said, "Well, what if I go to DC for a bit of a time and do some public service?" So I applied for the White House internship.
Okay.
Never imagined in a million years that I would be even called back, right? I mean,
Right.
the acceptance rate to this internship is very, very small, right? But I remember sitting in the library at Lewis one day and my phone rang, and it was a number that was unrecognizable. And my line brothers and me often play games on each other. And so I thought it was one of them. And so I
Right.
answered, and the guy on the other end said, "Hey, this is Ed Moy from the White House. Can you talk for a minute?" And I said, "Seth," that's my line brother. I said, "Seth, please stop playing. I'm studying for a test." And I hung up. I hung up
Right.
on
Right.
the guy from the White
Right.
House, okay,
I get that.
with no second guess, because he knew I was waiting, you know, on this call. And so I went back to studying, but it rang again. And I'm like, what is going on? So I step outside, and Ed said, Leonard, this is Ed Moy, Director of Presidential Personnel in the White House. Can you talk? And I said, this actually might be serious. So we had this hour-long. He was calling me to do the first round of the interview for the White House internship. Long story short, I was awarded the White House internship, went to DC, did some incredible work working in the White House for that semester. And but I became disenchanted with the idea of going to law school at the time. And disenchanted with American politics. I saw a real disconnect between the party I was in love with. I was a hardcore Republican, but I was also a person of faith who had this sort of tradition of justice that I was sort of going back and forth in my head. Like, there's a disconnect here between the policies I'm now seeing and what I believe the world should look like. And I called home to a professor at Lewis. His name was Mark Schultz. And he advised me to read this book. I read a book by a professor whose name was James H. Cone, the father of Black liberation theology.
Yes, sir. Yep.
I read Black liberation theology there in DC in one sitting. It changed my life and it changed my trajectory. And that's how I stepped away from law and wanted to really get into the study of religion and theology.
I will tell you, I had a similar experience reading that book. When I read Black Theology of Liberation, because I also was a Republican at one time in my early ministry, which we can go in, but James Cone, who was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, who ironically preached my ordination, but I didn't know he was frat at the time.
Oh my goodness!
And like I could have gripped him and I didn't, but that's another story. So yeah, we have these. I always think it's interesting, and you just bring up a point of, how sometimes, because I'm about to ask something about the frat in a second, how we can have these transformative moments with that are led by members of our fraternity. So as a result, going into that, why Alpha? Why did you decide to pursue membership in Alpha? What was it about Alpha Phi Alpha that attracted you?
Well, I should say how I got here. I talk about someone who just really had to make a bunch of changes. I was actually online. I was rushing Phi Kappa Theta, which is a historically white fraternity. In fact, the Pope at the time, Pope John Paul was a member of Phi Kappa Theta. And I will never forget what happened and why I sort of had to do my research. I was involved in a rush activity once on campus at Lewis, and there was an alpha. His name was Taji Mutalib, and Taji saw me sitting with these white dudes, pledging or rushing this fraternity, and Taji came up to me. He was like, "What are you doing?" I didn't really know Taji. I mean, I had a reputation for being this kind of standoffish Republican at the time. And so Taji came up to me. He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm rushing, Phi Cap. He said, "Man, listen, can you meet me in the gym tonight?" I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So I go to the gym, and Taji said, "I want you to do two things for me. I want you to read this book." It was a book on the divine. I can't remember which one it was.
Was it Lawrence Ross's book, or?
It was I can't recall which one it was. But he said, "Read this book of the Divine Eye, and then I want you to watch a movie called School Days."
There you go.
And so I went back to my dorm that night, and I read the book that he told me to read. I mean, I started reading it on the Divine Nine, and I watched School Days. I became very curious about what was happening, both in the text and also in the movie. And so I met with Taji for lunch the next day, and he said, "Tell me how the read's going." I said, "It's going well." He said, "Now I want you to go and do some research on this fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha." And so I went back to my dorm that night and I started researching Alpha Phi Alpha, and I was completely just overblown, just like overcome with the history, the people who I admired, both intellectually and prophetically, like Martin King and
Right.
W.E.B. Du Bois, who I learned were members of this organization. But then I also learned about the history of what it meant to be a Black Greek in 1906 and the idea of racial strife and creating new worlds, new institutions for Black folk. And I remember sitting that night thinking to myself, let me rethink what I'm doing. In other words, it seemed to me that there was a better way to think about making a fraternal connection to the culture that gave birth to me and one that I loved very deeply. And so I told my roommate at the time, who was actually also rushing Phi Cap, that I was going to stop the process because I wanted to rethink what I wanted to do. So Taji invited me out to the informational. I went, I learned more about the history. A guy by the name of John Williams was there because he was the advisor for the chapter at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an impression left upon me. And I knew leaving that informational that the principles, the ideals, and the aims of Alpha Phi Alpha represented best who I was and the person I was becoming. And I made the decision that day that pursuing this historic organization was in my immediate future. And I pursued it with all deliberate speed.
Yeah, and so you were initiated through Mu chapter.
Mimu chapter, I am the captain. And I say that.
We don't need to
Well,
mention that.
listen, I have to say
We
that.
have you anyway. Because
So, yeah,
you know.
I was on
Let's let you know a Deuce is driving this. I just want that on the record.
That's true. I was.
No, I'm sorry. Just go.
Yeah. No, I was in a line of four,
Okay.
and I pledged Mimu chapter, and it was the one of the most significant experiences of my life. And I have not looked back in almost 23 years of being in this fraternity. I have always been active, always been financial, and I have no regrets for this. I know the decision I made was right. Um, and
Now, were you a chapter officer?
Yeah,
What type of leadership activities were you involved in when you were a college brother?
yeah. So, a couple of things. Number one was chapter president. When my line was made, we became the officers. I was president. My number three was the treasurer. My number two was the secretary. And we were doing the work. We did things in that chapter that had never been done before. But I also had the opportunity at that time to work in the district administration of Brother Marcus Payne,
Okay.
who was district director. I was co-chair of district educational activities.
Okay.
And that's when I got my first opportunity at district leadership. But while in Mimu chapter, we for the first time we did a couple of things, but I want to say one that was really significant for our chapter under the leadership of my line. We organized the first time to have someone of the academic stellar of Cornell West to come to campus. And
I remember when you all did that. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yeah.
it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And of course, he's an alpha man, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of my fraternal history.
So after you graduated from Lewis, where did you go from there? Were you still on the? I know you said you had gotten disenchanted with the legal aspect.
Yeah.
So were you pivoting towards academics, or were you pivoting elsewhere?
Yeah, I was pivoting to academics.
Okay.
At the time I applied to 2 schools to study religion. Actually 3, I'm sorry. UChicago, Yale, and Harvard. And I was admitted to all 3 for the MDiv. But I ended up switching that. So I went to Harvard for my to study religion.
Okay.
It was my first semester at Harvard where I really knew that I wanted to get deep inside the academic study of religion. And so I switched degree programs from an MDiv to an MTS, which is the Master of Theological Studies.
Right.
And that began to shape my theological mind, but also it gave me the intellectual equipment, right, to ask the kind of questions that I wanted to ask and to study those ideas that were near and dear to my heart, which was at the time the Black religious traditions.
Okay.
And that is how I became very steeped in this study.
Yeah, and then from there, from So you got your MTS from Harvard,
Yep.
and then where did you go for your doctorate?
Right. So I ended up leaving. Well, I was supposed to continue there, but unfortunately, my father ended up dying
Mm,
while I was at Harvard, and I had all intention of returning home. He died very late in that semester that I was supposed to be finishing. And so it was very difficult to apply anywhere at that time. But I
right.
applied to Loyola Chicago, Loyola University Chicago.
Okay.
I was admitted and went to Loyola and I studied systematic theology. And again, had an incredible opportunity, experience at Loyola, and I'm very proud of my time there and what it afforded me in my own studies of theology and religion, where I really sit now squarely in religious studies, but trained as a systematic theologian.
And so your doctorate is in what again?
Yeah, theology.
Okay. Is it systematic theology
Mhm.
or
Yes.
okay. All right.
At the time, Loyola was in the process of changing it, so I think it's officially constructive theology.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. And so from there, what did you seems like you got on like the professor track. So
Absolutely.
um
Yeah.
how did what were your first because I know you've lived several places
Yep.
throughout your career. So what was it once you graduated from Loyola? What was your next move after that?
Well, when I finished my PhD, the job market was awful for academics, especially those studying what I do. It was just not, I mean, in other words, there were not many institutions who were attentive to the study of
Right.
Black religions back, when I finished in 2011. And so I did a postdoc at DePaul,
Hmm.
and that was phenomenal. I was there for 2 years until 2014.
Okay.
In 2015, I went to St. Louis University for a uh, visiting non-tenure track position. It was not supposed to be tenure track at all.
Okay.
So I got to St. Louis maybe in 2016 or something like that. And after my second year in that visiting position, which would have been 2018, I believe, I had a job offer to leave and go elsewhere for a tenure track position. And St. Louis University countered that offer to keep me there. And so I became a tenure track. So my first tenure track job was at St. Louis University.
Okay.
And then in 2021, the University of Illinois posted this position that I'm in now on Black religions. And I put
I'm
my
sorry.
heart.
And you teach Black religions, and I'm sorry, I said African American studies at the beginning. So
No,
it's
no, yeah, I'm right now. I'm duly appointed in two apartments,
okay.
religion and Black studies, and so
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah, and
All
so
right.
my research focus is Black religions, and I've been here at the U of I. This is my third year at the institution.
So let me ask you one thing that I hear a lot is that there are a number of people who, a number of academics who are Black, who are African American, who they feel frustrated by the lack of Black male peers in academic settings, whether it be professionally or even just working on masters or doctorates. What has what was your experience like, and is your experience like? But maybe more importantly, what things do you think we can do to draw more Black male educators in the realm of higher education to educate our young, Black and brown brothers and sisters who are coming behind us?
Yeah, I mean, listen, as someone who was in my very early 40s, I should not say I'm the first of anything,
Right,
but that's not the case.
right.
I was the first Black person to receive a PhD in theology from Loyola Chicago.
Oh, were you? Wow. Okay.
The first. I was the first tenure track professor of theology at St. Louis University.
Hmm.
And on faculty now, I was a part of a dual hire with extraordinary scholar, Alexia Williams, who also does Black religions. And we
Mhm.
were the first in our unit hired in this area. Um, Academia needs Black professors.
Right.
It it's a game changer for Black students. It's also a game changer for the academy. Without the voices of Black scholars doing the kind of work that we do and raising the kind of questions that we raise and pushing back against, you know, uh, dominant forms of knowledge production and begging for more nuance in how we think about knowledge production, how we think about the studies of religion and other disciplines, the academy loses. The academy loses when the academy looks like a single demographic or a single gender. The university wins when it not only produces Black scholars and Brown scholars and other scholars who are underrepresented, but the students win. The students win when they are introduced to a wide, spectrum of authors,
Right.
be they Black, Brown, Hispanic, white, European, parts of the African continent, and their knowledge base is deepened. Sadly, when I went to St. Louis University and was on faculty there, this was in 2017, whatever it was. The PhD list at that institution at the time did not have a single Black author for the PhD students to be studied on, to
Wow.
read for their comprehensive exams. It looks different now, but all that to say that the university in the world of academia wins, it looks better, it represents more in a more diverse way, right? The various paths that we have toward obtaining knowledge. And for me, Brother Smoot, one of the best joys of this life is when I can impact all of my students, be they Black, white, Hispanic, you name it, whatever the case is. I will also say that for me, it feels good when I can walk in a lecture hall and I see Black students.
Right.
There are not enough. There are not
And,
enough.
and so, how do you think we can encourage more Blacks to go into the academic disciplines in terms of becoming professors, becoming educators, getting into those, getting into those areas, and even encouraging them to pursue that to begin with? I mean, it seems that there are certain disciplines, religion, law, education, that naturally lead towards that. But there are a lot of other disciplines that where you can pursue degrees in higher education that could equally benefit from that. So, from your standpoint, as someone who is a professor and actively involved in higher ed, how do you think there are ways, or do you see ways that we can go about encouraging our Black brothers and sisters and Brown to come up and pursue these paths and these opportunities?
I think it has to be a multifaceted approach, right? I think it takes the education system. I also think it takes fraternal organizations, right? We have the extraordinary program, go to high school, go to college. Students can imagine, but they can imagine better when they have something to imagine. In other
Right.
words, I think the presence of Black professors, women and men, in front of our students, engaging secondary education, right? Being present at college days for churches or other civic organizations, making reading sexy again, right?
Right. Right.
Um, really pushing the idea that reading and studying and the intellectual life is a life that's worth having. And I think constant, demonstration of that to our young people, it could be world changing for students, Black and Brown students, and other underrepresented groups, but they have to see us. And I think it's so important also, Brother Smoot, that we enact programs, right, at the fraternal level and otherwise, of around reading, writing, right, the kind of hallmarks of the intellectual life, and push our young people to believe that this is in fact a career path that is not only beneficial for themselves, but is beneficial for those we serve. And I know that's why I get such a joy in this kind of work that I do as a university professor.
And that's one of the reasons. I mean, while I did try to look at people in different vocations for this program, but I do think I want to. I'll be very interested to see what types of things Brother Rawls will say about his work as a high school principal, and the struggles that he has faced, and knowing the work that he's done, and how that will measure up, with the type of work that you've done in terms of, promoting education in that area. So I mean that, I find all of that very interesting as someone who flirted with the idea of into academia, then realizing I probably don't have the temperament for it, but looking at other ways to promote. I want to go back for a quick second. As I stated at the begin, one thing I did get right is you are the district director for the District of Illinois of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Can you tell me why you sought that position and what kind of your responsibilities are as district director?
Yeah, I want to, for me, I just want to serve the fraternity. I really love Alpha Phi Alpha. My family would tell you, I love our fraternity. I love who we are as a bond of brothers. I love what we stand on and what we believe in, our mission that guides us. And so at the time I was turning 20 in the fraternity, I thought to myself, how can I give back to this organization? And how can I better serve Alpha? I had been a, chapter president of both alumni and undergraduate chapters. I had served in multiple regional vice president administrations. I had served in the administration of Brother Everett Ward on the Social Justice Commission. And so I had lots of experience, working in the fraternity in various capacities, including chairing a regional convention. And I thought to myself, how can I serve? And I believe I had the passion, the credentials, and the vision to become a district director. And Alpha is best seen at the local level. It's at the local level where the work really happens. We enact at the district and the chapter level the vision of the general president in concert with our regional vice president. But it is our job at the district to implement the vision of Alpha Phi Alpha and to make certain that we are, in fact, putting into programs, the various programs that really make us who we are as Alpha men. And so part of that, for me, meant also, using the position, as to my advantage and to our advantage as much as possible. What I mean by that is oftentimes as a district director, we have to craft out what it looks like, right? Because the Constitution is not very strong in this area. We know what our responsibilities are. It doesn't mean that we are limited to that, right? In other words, we are bound by the Constitution, but we can also do innovative, things in our district like this. Right. We can do innovative programming in our district, like training initiatives for our college men. We can do innovative things, around voting, around social justice, all of the things that we are doing in the District of Illinois. And so part of what I wanted to do was showcase what it might mean to have a vision for a district. That's a very large district, by the way, and collectively bring the chapters behind that vision that is in concert with the region, in concert with our general organization, and really be agents of change in the state of Illinois. We have a robust responsibility of making certain that we are serving our communities. And so, with the district, for me, that meant partnering with our lawmakers, which we did at our most recent district conference. And it's an
Right.
ongoing activity. It
Right.
means getting behind our state legislators to push for those policies that make real impact in our communities. It means leading the vision toward what it means to be a servant of the most underserved communities. It also means having a vision for our future leaders, our college men. I am a strong component, a strong proponent of the college men. Far often, our college men, feel isolated from the larger vision of Alpha Phi Alpha. And I ran on a platform that promised our college men that they will be at the table. And we have been doing that, and we succeeded at that. But part of that for me meant making certain that we put into place training and opportunities to actually catapult our college men to leadership in both the fraternity and in their exterior lives. And so in this district, we are launching the School for the Better Making of Men, which is our training and mechanism program for our college leaders. And this year, we will be launching a number of other opportunities around Alpha Illinois Serve. We're going to be serving our elderly. In other words, to be a district director first means that you are a servant of the brothers. And I say with full humility that it gives me, Brother Smoot, great pride to have been given the trust of our brothers. I don't take it lightly at all. And I realize that I serve at their pleasure and at the pleasure of our regional vice president. And so I take this responsibility extremely serious. Secondly, beyond being a servant, it means that you have vision, that you have foresight, that you present a vision that's sometimes bold, that pushes back against, the ideas that say we can't do this or we can't do that.
Right.
It means collectively bringing our chapters together around a unified purpose that at the end of the day is always about implementing the vision of our general president and our regional vice president. And that's exactly, for me, what being the district director means, that I am leading the way toward the implementation of their visions in this most phenomenal organization.
Yeah. So one of the things I do appreciate about what you've done is your advocacy for college brothers in the district and trying to push them towards more presence in the region, which is obviously similar to your experience as when you were a college brother. So, as a former chapter advisor, I can say I truly appreciate that about your leadership thus far. So we're running up on time, but the last thing I want to ask you about, I want to talk to you about your book. So the Black Coptic Church, I will admit, Black Coptic Church, Race and Imagination in a New Religion. Now, I have started reading it. Unfortunately, I have not yet finished it.
Sure.
But I find a couple of different things, and so I have to remember I have to take off my preacher hat because because as a preacher, there's a number of questions I want to ask you about. But just fundamentally, starting with, what was this book formed out of your doctoral work, or was it inspired from something else?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and the book is out with NYU Press. Just came out last year, 2023. This book is a part of what I want to call my larger research agenda. What animates my research are questions about Black religions of the Black diaspora, right? And so quite a bit of information exists on, mainstream traditional forms of Black religion, be they Black Protestants, Methodists, etc. But Smoot, being from Chicago, you and I both know that Chicago is really sort of an epicenter for the deep sense of religious diversity that exists, among the Black religious imagination. And so growing up in Chicago, it was not uncommon, on any given Sunday, right, to come across members who belong to the Moorish Temple, to the Nation of Islam, the Black Coptic Church, more mainstream churches. It really is, for me, the gateway to the study of Black religion. But more importantly, in Black History Month, I think it's important to say that Black history or Black religious history is, in fact, Black history, and it's American history, right? And so for me, my entree into this work comes from two locations. One, as an academic who is deeply curious about these traditions and what they have to offer. I think, as you know, right now I'm working on the book on the Nation of Islam,
Right.
which is the first ethnographic study of this religious movement. But in my family, Smoot, my family runs the gamut of Black religions, from Black Pentecostals, and I say this in the book's introduction, from Black Pentecostals to Black Catholics. I have members in the Nation of Islam in my family, and the Black Coptic Church, among others. And so as a child, I was exposed to an array of Black religions. My curiosity of the Black Coptic Church started, I don't know, when I was probably 5 or 6. I remember my aunt, who had married into this tradition. We gathered at my grandmother's home for, I think it was Mother's Day or some holiday. And my aunt, who was a recent convert, came into in my grandmother's home, and she was dressed differently, but she had just come from church. I had never seen anything like this. And so I was curious about the religious garments that she donned, as well as her husband. And this sparked the curiosity of a then 5-year-old child. Obviously, the questions I raise now are a lot different than that 5-year-old self, but that was my entree into the tradition, and which was the beginning of a long kind of interaction, right, with the group as well as other Black traditions. What spawned this particular interest in the book was a course I took with an esteemed anthropologist named Marla Frederick at Harvard, who introduced me to people like Arthur Fawcett, who was an anthropologist, who wrote a wonderful text called Black Gods of the Metropolis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Familiar with that.
And so I became sort of interested in these new religions. And Marla inspired me because she also introduced me to ethnographic approaches to the study of religion, what it means to embed ourselves in the community and observe people in their space. And so my book is an ethnographic text, right, in which I am in conversation with, I'm embedding myself in the community, learning about how individuals in the church understand their faith tradition. But the more specific question that guides my research, Smoot, is how these Black religions use their religion in their approach toward building Black identity, or their understanding of Black identity. So the book sits at the intersection of Black religions and race and religion, or the construction of Black identity.
And one of the things that I thought of when I first started reading your book was looking at, and again, now obviously I have my historian hat on.
Yeah.
But when we talk about the Great Migration, when we talk about the influx of Blacks from the South coming into, particularly into the Midwest, and bringing in all those different traditions. And one of the things that I thought of was, as I did research for my book on Alpha Illinois history, but other stuff, looking at how many of our early brothers were a part of these different faith traditions that we don't talk about, that we had brothers who were in the organization that led up to the Nation of Islam, then later became a part of the nation. But we have brothers who were Hebrew Israelites. We have brothers who were part of the peace mission. We had one brother, I believe, and actually I think he's a brother from Theta, who for a time was a right hand to Father Divine. And so we have all these intersections, not only with our community at large, but also within our fraternity. And so when it comes to examining the role, there is a thing that, oh, well, if you're not Baptist or Protestant or Catholic or AME, you're not a real Christian. You don't have a real faith
Yeah.
base. And what I get from your book, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is what you are trying to illuminate is that, there is a deep tradition with these other types of faith. And I put that in quotations because you're saying that their faith is legitimate, a legitimate part of our history as Blacks. And so there it becomes important to bring this information up in a way that is accessible. And I think another thing I commend you for for something that's mainly an academic text, it's very accessible. It's very, in terms of the information, the language. I'm curious though, and this is the troublemaker in me. Have you gotten any pushback from the fact that you are highlighting other non-traditional aspects of the Black faith movement? Have you gotten any pushback from peers or from associates for highlighting these other areas?
Not yet. I mean, I think, the reviews have yet to come out, but, Smoot, I belong to a generation of scholars who are interested in arguing for a more elastic understanding of what we mean by Black religions. And I say that with an S very intentionally.
Right.
Black religions are diasporic, right? It includes hoodoo and voodoo. It includes Santeria. It includes Pentecostalism. It includes Methodism. It includes Islam. It includes Black Judaism, right? And
let's remember, if I might, real quick, let's remember the former First Lady. She comes from a tradition where her family members were Black Jews, which outside of Sammy Davis Jr., most people don't think of Blacks as being Jews. So
that's right. And there is a long and rich history of Black Jews, in fact.
Right.
But I'll say this, far too often we look at so-called mainstream forms of religion, and there's a tendency to attach the word cult to these groups.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
yes.
The Nation of Islam was considered a cult, right? Father Divine was considered a cult. I take my cue from the Princeton historian Judith Weisenfeld, who says that a cult is something we just fundamentally disagree with, right? But calling something a cult tells me nothing about what they believe.
Right.
It tells me nothing about why people were drawn to these movements and what kept them in the movements.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like Weisenfeld, I ditched that category. In fact, I find it's not a useful category for me thinking about religion. What I am curious about are the various imaginations that Black people employ in their quest to make sense of the divine. And for me, as you see in the introduction to my book, I use the metaphor of an earthquake to ground the text, as to really articulate that the Great Migration, right, the slave trade, these are earthquake experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And the question for me becomes, what does it mean to build in the aftermath of an earthquake, when resources are scarce, when identity is lost? And in many ways, for Black migrants, and even further back, those who have come across the Middle Passage, who exist in what I call this exilic experience, living in exile, and trying to make sense of what it means to exist in a place that is not home, right? So in many respects, these new traditions, like Black Jews and the Black Coptics, I suggest we are faced with a group of people who are in search of Zion, right? To use a term by Emily Rabateau. They are in search of a place called home. Religion then becomes this mechanism by which they construct longer histories of Black identity, right? They construct longer geographies of Black identity that are not beholden to the American project of 1619. And so, what we find in traditions like the Nation of Islam, like the Moorish Science Temple, and the Black Coptics is this attempt to construct a longer arc of history. For them, it means connecting to this homeland, right? Connecting to this identity that they believe is not tethered to a cultural production of white supremacy.
Right.
And so, both in the first book and in the second book on the Nation of Islam, I'm curious about how religion assists these believers in finding home, in building home, in coming out of exile and reclaiming, or as they would say, recovering an identity that they believed was in fact stolen from them. And I think that is the richness of these traditions in what they tell us about Black folk living on the margins.
Right. And yeah, I'm looking forward. I mean, I'm going to get through your book. I'm looking forward to the next one. I was, when you bring up the Nation of Islam, I was very surprised to find out that our fraternity had a role in preserving, the Elijah Muhammad's home.
Yeah.
But also found out that, we had members who were walking with Elijah Muhammad prior to that, which you can find out on my historical tour if you ever come on. But
which I need to. Let me just say this real quick about the Nation of Islam, right? Part of what my work will argue about the nation, again, I'm a part of this generation of scholars like Stephen Finley at Louisiana State University, who want to read the Nation of Islam through a religious lens, and that is the real specific point that I want to argue here. Far too often, for me, the Nation of Islam is read as a nationalist group. It's read as a political group. It is read as a group that is religiously suspect, both by the larger Muslim community, even in the world of academia. But what I'm finding in my research is that believers in the Nation of Islam have a deep spiritual life. It is that spiritual life that guides their concern for racial uplift, for economic, expansion of Black dollars. But I think that once we read these traditions from the lens of the study of religion, we may find, different, narratives to tell about these groups, and it doesn't, discount, the questions that we must raise to the nation and to the Black Coptic movement and others.
Right.
There is a different lens as a scholar of religion that I am reading these traditions within that I think will differentiate itself from other works in the field. And the fact that it is an ethnographic study is something I think that will add a very real beneficial understanding to the Nation of Islam.
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. Even though you're a captain and doing all this stuff, we gotta. But no, I mean, I think your scholarship and what your scholarship represents to others coming behind you, I think that is important, and that you're engaging and asking these questions. And so I think that is something I appreciate. We've got about a minute left to go, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. You've been very kind, but in closing, what do you see as someone who is involved in the academic information of our communities? What's one thing you would say you would like to leave with someone, a young person coming up in the world who is struggling with their racial identity, struggling with their cultural identity? What words of encouragement would you give to them from your work as an academic, as a professor, to encourage them to move forward?
One of the first songs that my children learned was James Brown. Say it loud. I'm Black and I'm proud. Say it loud. And I have videos of those kids when they were just 1 and 2 years old. I would be in the backyard and I would say it loud. I'm Black and I'm proud.
Right.
We got to be so proud of who we are. We are a gift to this world. Black culture is beautiful. It is American history, from literature, the arts, to academia, to sports, to medicine, to government, to history. There is no American project without the blood, the sweat, and the tears of Black folk,
right,
who often sacrificed life and limb to give this American experiment whatever it believes it has. And so I think, Chuck, part of what we have to continue to do is give our kids the audacity and the courage to, when they hear that phrase, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. And I'll leave you with this, man. All my kids learn two things: say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, and then they learn Nina Simone, to be young, gifted, and Black.
Yep.
And in my home, there is no bypassing Black history, because if they know it, they'll walk in it and they'll be proud to be who they are. And I want to echo the words of Brother David Griggs in South Lambda, who says very, very fervently that Black history is 365 days a year.
Right.
We do this in February as to take a moment and really reflect, but there isn't a single month that goes by where Black folk have not made a contribution to the world in which we have, in the world that we inhabit. So I want to send a shout out to Black folk who are doing it for the culture. I want to especially take a moment to lift up Black women and the sacrifices they make,
and continue to make.
If you have not had a chance to view the sermon at the joint meeting of the Baptist conventions, Dr. Gina M. Stewart,
and
she gave us some justice, she gave us some love, and she gave us the best of the Black prophetic tradition. And that woman is a preaching woman. And I hope more churches take a cue and say that phrase that Cheryl Townsend Jukes give us: if it wasn't for the women, there would be no Black church.
Right.
And,
that's right.
So that I want to leave by lifting up Gina Stewart's name.
Well, Reverend Dr. Brother McKinnis, my good brother. No, this has been a pleasure. I thank you for authorizing this series. As you referenced, and I said in the introduction, we're going to do this beyond just Black History.
Absolutely.
Although I do want to note that when you quoted David Griggs, you quoted a deuce. But anyway, but brother, I want to thank you for helping us to kick this off, for setting a standard of what our subsequent conversations are going to be. We have four more individuals coming. Next week is Brother Greg Kelly, who is the president of the SEIU Healthcare Union, 1987 initiate of Alpha Theta chapter. And so we're looking forward to him. But we thank Brother McKinnis, and we thank all of you for tuning in. Please share this information with your friends. You can hit like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. Please follow us on Facebook and on Instagram, the District of Illinois, to keep abreast on these and other programs that we are doing in the District of Illinois on behalf of Alpha Phi Alpha under the tutelage of Dr. McKinnis, our Regional Vice President, Brother Franklin Stacy, and our current General President, Brother Willis Lonzer. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. And until then, remember, as Dr. McKinnis just said, we may be celebrating Black History in February, but Black History truly is 365 days a year. Thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.